Working in a hospital or other medical setting can be scary for many different reasons. Not only are you constantly exposed to death and dying, but some of the events that take place can be seriously creepy. With this in mind, it should come as no surprise that hospitals are ripe with ghost stories. Doctors, nurses, and other medical staff have been sharing their spookiest, most terrifying encounters for decades. So, turn off the lights, grab a cozy blanket and cup of tea, and prepare yourself for harrowing tales of haunted hospital rooms, visits from past patients, and eerie encounters not for the faint of heart. Many hospital ghost stories center on patients who just won't make the journey to the other side, but this is one of the most bone-chilling we've ever heard. A nurse working in a palliative care unit was performing a typical post-mortem care routine on a patient when she noticed that his eyes hadn't been closed yet. The nurse closed his eyes and went back to her business, only to look over and see that his eyes were still open, fixating on the nurse's face. If that wasn't creepy enough, he then let out a groan and grabbed onto the bed rail as she washed him. After triple-checking his pulse and confirming that the patient was indeed dead, she quickly zipped up the bag and did everything she could to avoid his once again open eyes. A nurse working in a small community hospital had the scare of a lifetime when she noticed that the cupboard doors in 2 empty rooms were being opened and closed, but there wasn't a soul in sight. When the young nurse asked a fellow clinician what was going on, she was told this is a common occurrence after a patient dies. Typical or not, that's just plain creepy if you ask us. This story comes from a new nurse who got quite an introduction to the medical field one night. Working in the pediatric ward of the hospital, the nurse noticed a little girl standing near the nurse's station down the hallway. As the nurse started to walk towards the pigtailed child, asking her if she was lost or needed help, the girl up and vanished. Yep, she completely disappeared into thin air. But this wasn't the only sighting of the child. Other nurses have seen her in the ER, going in and out of patient rooms, and even running through the halls of the hospital. We all have our theories, but this is one of the most frightening hospital ghost stories we've ever heard. It's okay, you can turn on the lights for this one. Nurse Jay was working with a patient who had many different illnesses, but just couldn't wrap his head around the idea of death, even though it was imminent. Whenever his monitors would beep, he would scream at the nurses, "Don't let me die! Don't let me die!" At some point, the patient's cardiac monitor sounded an alarm, causing Nurse Jay and others to come into the room with a crash cart, only to see that the patient was floating 2 inches above the bed, laughing maniacally. Once they got over the shock of what they were seeing, the nurses tried to revive the man, but their efforts were in vain. After the time of death had been called, Nurse Jay and the others could hear the man whispering, "You let him die. Too bad." And, again, "Don't let me die." Nightmares haunted the nurses for weeks, as you can imagine. If you didn't believe in ghosts before now, this story should change your mind. A nurse was caring for a dying patient who was quite scared. She was finally able to calm him down and left his bedside for the nurse's station. The nurse looked over to check on the patient and saw a black shape standing over the bed, peering down at him.